Chinese is a rich language. The words often carry different meanings. For example, 100 years doesn't just mean 100 years. It's also a polite way to say death or die. This July 1st was the Chinese Communist Party's centennial or 100-year anniversary, and CCP leaders are well aware of the double meaning of the occasion. Facing a massive hand-picked crowd in Tiananmen Square, they showed no mood for celebration. Xi Jinping gave a doomsday speech and cried out, "The Chinese people will never allow foreign forces to bully, oppress, or enslave us. Whoever nurses delusions of doing that will crack their heads and spill blood on the Great Wall of steel built from the flesh and blood of 1.4 billion Chinese people." How could she possibly ignore the writing on the wall? Hi everyone, welcome to Lei's Real Talk. I'm Lei. The Chinese Communist leaders cannot ignore the signs of the CCP's impending end. With the world still struggling to recover from a pandemic originating in China, Paramount leader Deng Xiaoping's prophetic description from 47 years ago of how the CCP would end becomes a dire reality. Let's take a look.
如果中国有朝一日变了颜色，变成一个超级大国，也在世界上称王称霸，到处欺负人家，侵略人家，剥削人家，那么世界人民就应当给中国戴上一顶社会帝国主义的帽子，就应当揭露它，反对它，并且同中国人民一道打倒它。
Deng's suggestion that the world should join the Chinese people in defeating the CCP frightens Xi Jinping. That's why she said in the speech, "The Chinese people have never bullied, oppressed, or enslaved the peoples of other countries. Not in the past, not now, and not in the future." Deng Xiaoping worried a lot about the CCP's end. He gave several talks during his 1992 tour of South China, a year after the Soviet Union had collapsed. During the tour, he recorded many of his meetings and conversations. In one conversation he had with his children, he told them about a scene that kept him awake at night. That was when the Soviet Union collapsed. Yeltsin announced that the Communist Party had ceased its activities in Russia. As soon as he made the announcement, tens of thousands of people gathered in front of the central building of the Communist Party. People automatically gave way to let people working in the building pass when they left the building. But what did the party staff members get? Ordinary citizens spitting on them and throwing rubbish at them. A behemoth that had been in power for 70 years and claimed to have tens of millions of party members collapsed overnight, just like that. Deng's great concern for how the Communist Party would end overnight, just like that, is so valid and relevant today. It's probably what keeps Xi Jinping awake at night now, because what triggered the collapse of communism in Soviet Russia is happening right now. According to Mikhail Gorbachev, the Soviet Union's last general secretary and the man who dismantled the Communist Party, the nuclear disaster at Chernobyl in 1986 was a turning point that caused the collapse of Soviet communism. In the early morning of April 26, 1986, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded. Surplus energy surged in reactor number 4 and combusted, killing nearby workers and exposing others to deadly radiation. Tens of thousands of Soviet citizens came to help and were unknowingly exposed to dangerous levels of radiation. There was no warning from the authorities. The true extent of the disaster was revealed only after a Swedish nuclear plant, 20 miles away, discovered high radiation levels and determined the source to be coming from the Soviet Union. Radioactive clouds from Russia were drifting across Europe. It took 2.5 days for the Soviet state media to report the explosion, and the news was very vague. If we fast forward to 2020, doesn't that sound just like what happened in Wuhan at the beginning of last year? Just like the coronavirus pandemic that has killed almost 4 million people around the world, the Chernobyl disaster was considered at the time the worst man-made catastrophe in history, both in terms of cost and casualties. The massive explosion released radioactive material across Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine, and as far as Scandinavia and Western Europe. Just like how the current public health crisis resulted from cover-up and misinformation, the meltdown in Chernobyl was the product of a system built on lies and totalitarian ideology, exasperated by the regime's inept response. 5 years after the Chernobyl meltdown, the country ended communism. Gorbachev said that Chernobyl opened the possibility of much greater freedom of expression to the point that the system as we knew it could no longer continue. Journalist James Bloodworth said that the Soviet Union appeared stable at the time of the Chernobyl explosion. There was no mass protests, and the country's economic indicators were not particularly terrible. Most high-profile dissidents were either abroad or not effective. Relatively speaking, the situation in China now is 100 times worse. In addition to mass protests, ordinary truth-telling citizens like Dr. Li Wenliang, who tried to alert people about the virus, have become unintentional dissidents. Most importantly, alarms about possible nuclear disasters in China have already gone off. Recently, unusual activity at a nuclear power plant jointly owned by China and France was discovered to pose an imminent radiological threat. French company Framatome, which owns 30% of the Taishan nuclear power plant, reached out to the U.S. government for a waiver that would allow it to use American technology to resolve the issues at the Chinese plant. CNN first broke the news and said it was unusual for a foreign company to unilaterally reach out to the American government for help when its Chinese state-owned partner didn't acknowledge any problems. The plant's main owner, China General Nuclear Power Corp., issued a statement on its website saying there was no problem. What's more alarming is that China's regulator, the National Nuclear Safety Administration, quietly raised the acceptable limits of radiation to more than double to avoid shutting down the plant. Professor Najmuddin Mashkati, an expert on nuclear safety, said that nuclear safety, just like aviation safety, depends on a paranoid regulatory culture and transparency, and the combination of these two things can make or break the nuclear power industry in any country. China's reckless, Great Leap Forward style push for nuclear energy, its drive to lower costs by cutting corners, as well as its disregard for human life and lack of transparency are the sources of safety hazards, and the risks are not just limited to China and its people. On January 11, 2016, the central government of China wrote on its website, "In China's One Belt, One Road strategy, nuclear power, like high-speed rail, are key strategic industries supported by the state." It further wrote, "If China can obtain 20% of the market of the countries along the Belt and Road, it will directly generate nearly 1 trillion yuan and 5 million jobs." Having deemed nuclear energy one of its strategic industries since 2015, the CCP has been ambitiously exporting the technology worldwide. According to the World Nuclear Association, the CCP is currently exporting nuclear power to Pakistan, Romania, Argentina, the United Kingdom, Iran, Turkey, South Africa, Kenya, Egypt, Sudan, Armenia, and Kazakhstan. The world has already paid a huge price during the pandemic, and we don't want to see another Chernobyl again. The CCP may see its end soon, but no more innocent lives should go down with it. Far too many have been lost already as a result of this ruthless regime. As the CCP celebrates its 100 years, people need to wake up and must understand the true meaning of these events so as not to be fooled again. Thank you for watching. Please like and share my videos and subscribe. I will see you next time.